Hello, everyone. I was just seeing who all is in here today. Welcome in, Miss Dina, Donnie, Janet, Debbie, Serena, Susan, Party on Wayne, 87. Love that username. That's great. Party on Wayne, Party on Garth. Stevie, hi. Aspiring court reporter. If you guys see, hey Charlotte, if you guys see our new logo, Stevie Irwin is the one who made that. And if you are not following him, you're making a big mistake. He has a true crime YouTube channel called True Crime Jungle. And also, he is a very talented graphic designer. So we are lucky to have him in Jabo Nation. And I just wanted to say that because he just did some work for us on our logos. Jonathan is here. Good to see you. Dizzy, hi. All right. Mom and Dad are here. Hello. Polly, MJ. Oh my goodness. Tons of you. Tina, Groot. All right. Awesome. So before we start today on YNW Melly, I was going to tell you that yesterday I kicked off my project for December, which is I'm calling it TDM, which is the daily mandala. I'm going to do 31 mandalas, so one every day of December. I did one for yesterday. I posted in Discord. You can also post them on Twitter. You can post them wherever you're comfortable, but I posted mine on Discord, but here it is. So I did that yesterday. I'm going to do one today, but it's going to be really late tonight when I get home because I'm going to go to a musical with Sloan. We're going to go to the Beauty and the Beast tonight with a good friend of mine, and we will not be home until super late. So I've got that coming up tonight. And you guys, okay, so Melly, I did not know that this would consume. I should know now every time, like I'm going to get like this, but this just consumed me. And I don't know if you've listened to Melly's music much before, and I really hadn't until I started doing this research. And I mean, first of all, he has a really pretty singing voice, and he kind of does the style of singing while the lyrics are more like gangster rap. So it's just a unique thing that he sort of brought to the table back when he started rapping. So I have been like, I go to sleep with, Murder on My Mind, the song, not actually Murder on My Mind, but the song. And I seriously wake up with it, or Mixed Personalities, another like earworm / banger, whatever the kids call it these days. But both of those I cannot get out of my head. And I told Jay, like, maybe after the show today, like, those will die off because it's really getting it's getting too much at this point. But I wanted to start out a little bit with an overview if you aren't familiar with the case. We watched the first trial on our channel, and Jay live streamed it. And you all remember it was pretty maddening because there were a crap ton of objections and the trial took forever and it ended in a mistrial hung jury. And now they're trying to try him again. In the state of Florida is where this happened. Melly and his 4 friends were from Gifford, Florida, and the population there is only 4,481 people. So under 5,000 people in this town. So it's important to know that he's from this very small and very low income area Gifford, Florida is. If you Google Gifford, Florida, like the first Google result is that it is known as a ghetto. So it is a very not very populated, but very crime ridden. Their crime statistics are very high, and unfortunately their income there per person is very low. So Melly, who's Jamel Demons, he's 24 years old now. At the time that the crime happened, he's 19 years old. He becomes friends with Juvie, YNW Juvie. And I'm going to use their YNW names today, but I know that people that are in the chat can probably help you out if you can't remember their actual names. But I'm going to use their YNW names because I'm mostly going from Melly's point of view today. So Juvie and YNW Melly have been friends since kindergarten. I also wanted to point out before I started that I got tons of information, and I will link the podcast in the show notes. The podcast is exclusively on Spotify and is called Infamous, and it is amazing. It's only like 9 episodes, I believe, but they are so well done. The interviews are amazing. They even have Raven Liberty even does a statement, sends in a statement to them at one point in time. It is really worth checking out. Even if you are not super into even going to watch the trial again, it's so interesting and it's really, really well done. So, and I found out about that from the journalist that we had on with us about the case, Bryson Boom Paul. And if you aren't following him on Twitter, you should be, because he is doing a great crossover between the YNW Melly trial and the other trial that we're live streaming right now, which is Young Thug. So he has tons of information on his Twitter, and you'd want to be following him. Also going to put him in the show notes. And then the other thing, besides that, listening to the music that I did and listening to the podcast and watching interviews with Melly, was that I watched his documentary, which ended up coming out just like a month after, or a couple months after the murders. So to backtrack again, sorry, I wanted to give credit to the creators that did those things, and I will definitely have them in the show notes because that's where all my research came from, and they're all amazing sources. So Juvie enters the scene in Melly's life in kindergarten. They went to kindergarten together. There's an adorable story of Juvie when he was like sad because he's in kindergarten and he doesn't know anybody, and he sees Melly come in, and Melly like looks at him and has a big smile, and they both just kind of start dancing because they're happy to see each other. And Juvie is such a sympathetic person in this story. Every interview that I've seen of him, he seems like he was the heart of their group of 4. And hearing him speak is extra heartbreaking. And then Bort, YNW Bortland, who is the co-defendant in this case, their cases are severed, but he is also charged with murder. He came around in like later elementary school, and then Sack Chaser, YNW Sack Chaser, he moved in middle school. And at times when Melly is talking about his friends, he calls Juvie his brother. He calls Sack my twin. So I just think that's interesting. We're going to keep that in mind. And we're going to move to the timeline a little bit of these happenings. So basically what happens is these 4 guys make it out of Gifford because of Melly and this YNW group that they form having a career in rap music. And so the 4 of them are super tight. They each sort of have their own function within the group, and Sack is basically functioning as like the brain of the operation, the somewhat like the manager. I mean, he's not the official manager because Track is the manager of them, but he is the brain of the operation. And Bort was in charge of all of their merch. And like I said, Juvie was kind of their heart of their organization, and Melly was the one who was the front man. He was the guy singing. He was the guy, writing lyrics, and they were helping him with all of that. So he has some things come out before this time, but in August of 2018 is when they dropped the IMU mixtape, which had 30 songs on it. It was a lot. That's a lot of work to put into just one mix so they were really working hard. They were putting out a lot of music, a lot of content. And tensions were rising within the group because Psych and Jamie King, who is Melly's mother, were reportedly not getting along. And this is not just reportedly. I mean, there were Instagram posts between them. There are videos. There were things that have since been deleted, but they existed and they're out there on the internet. So we know that it's not just allegedly that they were having trouble. Sorry. So tensions are high because of that. They are actually like going back and forth in a way that is super disturbing to see, because they're both threatening each other. We get to the point where, Jamie's like, she has bigger guns than him. You have a little gun. I have a big gun. And YNW Sack Chaser is saying that, she needs to be out. Basically, they're both kind of vying to be that number one person to Melly, who is the advisor, who is the person. And Jamie says, one of the last things she says about that to Sack Chaser while he's still alive is, Melly is talented, and he is talented because his mom. So I thought that was an interesting little tidbit. So tensions are high. In 2018, they are at the recording studio late at night, super late, like 2, 3 in the morning. And there are 8 of these friends there, 4 other people that are kind of in their crew, but they aren't really super important to the story at this point in time. So these 4 guys, we know this because we've seen, if you watch the trial with us, we see them get into the Jeep together. We see them all 4 get into this Jeep. We see Melly has a black Gucci bag on his back, which appears to have something in it. We don't know what it has in it, but it has something. He has a bag. And then the other 4 guys get into a red Mitsubishi. So on that evening, the next thing that we really know that happens is that YNW Bortland shows up at the hospital with Sack and Juvie dead in the car, saying and claiming to the police that they were victims of a drive-by. The police immediately are suspect of this because they go, the place that they say it happened, it isn't a usual place that drive-bys happen. It's a really nice neighborhood. There's not much privacy at all. There also is zero forensic evidence on the street that they say this happened. There's no broken glass. There's no skid marks. There's no bullet casings, etc. So they're already a little bit suspect. And then in December 2018, Melly's documentary comes out. Now, the story was Melly was not in the car with Bortland. Bortland was driving. Juvie and Sack were in the car. Melly was not in the car. His story at first was he's in the red Mitsubishi from the get-go, right? But then they find out there's a video about it. And so then the story becomes, well, YNW, Melly, and the other car, they meet up. And YNW Melly gets out for some reason that, isn't clear. And he gets in the red Mitsubishi and he goes, and then the drive-by happens. So that's kind of the story with that. But in 2018, the documentary comes out. And Melly is, for the first time, saying on camera himself that he was basically in the car. Like, he was a victim of the drive-by shooting. He places himself at the crime. So the cops were like, okay, we have got even more to go on now. We've got, the social media posts. We've got all these things. In 2019, January, Melly drops Mixed Personalities with Kanye West. He also starts to go on tour. And during that tour in February 2019 is when the Florida police arrest him. And he's charged with 2 counts of murder. And Florida decides they want to seek the death penalty. So at this time, Melly is 20 years old. At the time of the murder, he's actually still 19. He'll be 20 in May. He's May 1st is his birthday, 1999. So he's not quite 20 years old. He's still 19 years old when this happens. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what Melly says about himself and his childhood. Will be a big focus of this section. I mean, because when Melly was arrested, he's 19 years old. He was still a child. We have, tons of research on the human brain that says that our brains are not fully developed as a person until our later 20s. So definitely, and with trauma in your life, that happens even later or can be stunted and not happen at all. So let's talk a little bit about his childhood. So Melly was born to Jamie King, and Jamie got pregnant with Melly when she was 14 years old. She was ninth grader when she had him. And so she describes that as, her mom's trying to take care of her. And then now she has this baby. So they're both trying to take care of this baby, which must just be, I mean, Sloan turns 13 this week, and I can't wrap my brain around it. Because to me, she's such a baby still. So unfortunately, Melly's family that he is born into, his family of origin, has, they're living below the poverty line. Jamie is working like part-time jobs at like Dunkin' Donuts, Wendy's, Burger King, these kinds of places to try to make ends meet. When Melly is 9 years old, he goes after school every day to an uncle's house. When Melly's 9 years old, he describes this on the documentary as like, this is like a core memory for Melly. He is watching Mr. and Mrs. Smith on TV, and he is playing with a toy gun. And he's like rolling around the room, and, he's emulating Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie in that scene. And he accidentally rolls under his uncle's couch. And under his uncle's couch, he finds an actual gun. He finds an actual pistol. And he said he saw it and it was shiny. And he was so excited. And he knew it was a real gun. He took it outside and fired it at 9 years old. So I'm assuming there was not much supervision going on at that point. And he said he remembers that he couldn't hear out of his ear for like a week. But he took that gun with him that day at 9 years old and said that he began carrying that gun to school with him every day since the age of 9 years old. So at 12 years old, this kid's been now carrying a gun for 3 years to school. He says he carries it in his lunchbox, and sometimes he carries 2 pistols in his lunchbox. At 12, Jamie marries or is in a relationship with a man named Vinny. And this man is not good to Melly. He abuses him. And so, unfortunately, when Melly confronts Jamie about it and, wants her to get rid of Vinny in his life, Vinny's coming in. Hello. Oh, hi, Prudy. Unfortunately, Jamie, who I think at this time, I just told Jay this the other day. I'd done the math on this. Jamie, I think at this time is maybe late 20s. And Melly's 12. And she says, you're trouble. She sends him to live with his grandmother. It's actually his great-grandmother. And she stays with Vinny. So then at 13 years old, this child is still bringing weapons to school all the time. So he says he was Baker acted. So he was, committed against his wishes, which you're a kid. So, I mean, pretty much you're always going to be committed against your wishes. He says several times because he was bringing knives to school. He says, I did some terrorist type shit. I'd pull knives on people. I'd hold a knife to my throat and threaten to slit my own throat. And at 15 years old, Melly, still in and out of mental health problem situations, still just really going through it. This is when Melly starts to write songs. His very first, I mean, he wrote before that, but before this is when he starts to get noticed. And his first song drops in 2014 when he's 15. And he also that same year writes on Facebook, he writes, "I am always angry because I was abused as a child." And I just found that very striking that he is 15. He is getting a little bit of success in his life, but the main thing to him still is this anger that he has inside of him, no doubt for being abused, but then also feeling abandoned by his mom, and for her, staying with his abuser for a while. When he's 16 years old, he goes to jail for a year because he shoots at 3 other of his high school classmates. As we know, Melly's always just carrying a gun around school. He doesn't shoot in the school or he would have been in much bigger trouble, but he's like down the block from the school. He's like 500 meters away. So it's still counting as within the law, like an act of terror around a school building. So he gets a year in jail. And during that time, he writes his most famous song, arguably, which is "Murder on My Mind." So this is when he's 16 years old. The lyrics of "Murder on My Mind" are frankly the descriptions are so graphic and what you would think would be very real, about him shooting his friend and his crew, and the person dying in his arms, and how he always, no matter what, has murder on his mind. He's always thinking about murder. He wrote that in his jail cell, and it dropped while he was still in jail and already had like 1 million downloads by the time he got out. So he gets out of jail. He's 17 at that point in time. He then everything starts up with YNW and they start, having some success and things. At that point in time, he starts being interviewed a lot, by, different people that deal with hip hop music, rap, media, and those types of things. So this is the section where I took mostly from interviews with Melly, because he talks about, now there was never any defense put forward about his mental state in the trial. So we do not know the veracity of these claims because they were not presented via medical records or anything. But Melly says in one of his early interviews that he is bipolar and that he has ADHD. He also talks a lot about Adderall which is a common med for ADHD, in his song Mixed Personalities. So that's what he says is his diagnosis. Then later on, as it is about to come out, Mixed Personalities is about to come out, he really starts leaning into the fact that he has these mixed personalities. He's going to do, Melly versus Melvin, which is the cover photo, the thumbnail that I had today. So it's like Melly's on one side, Melvin's on the other side. On his social media, he begins posting like photos and asking his fans, like, do you think this is Melly or Melvin? So he really starts talking about these two personalities being so different. He says Melly is loving, genuine, turned up. He's happy Michael Jackson. That's what his quote is. He says that Melvin is Melly's protector and that Melvin is not an alter ego. He wants that to be clear. He is actually a person. Melvin is a person. Melvin only comes out at night, and Melly says, I only let him out at night, and I need to stop doing that. And that was in an interview with Genius that Melly said that. And he said that Melvin thinks about murder all day. That was in his Power 105.1 interview. He says he has 6 personalities, but he is only revealing 3 at the time. And she's like, why can't you reveal all 6? And he's like, well, I'm only revealing 3. And she's like, okay, well, what are they? And he says, Melly and Melvin, we already know about those 2. And then he says Marcus, which is interesting to me because his middle name is Maurice. Just that they all seem to have like that common thread with his name, because his name's Jamel Maurice. All 3 of the personalities. He says YNW Melly is the rapper. Melvin, though, he just started rapping too, he says in this interview, which is interesting. And then he says that Marcus, he says, quote, he be in disguise, shades, hats. He feel like a normal person. So that's when, and she has him elaborate on this. She says, so that's like when you're going out and you're trying to get things done and you're in disguise and he agrees with her. So that's kind of what he says about these personalities that he has. I'm looking on my notes. Sorry, guys. I have a lot of notes as usual, and I always try to organize them before the show, but then I end up, they're like, oh, if I highlight this in green, then I'll know. Oh, but what? Was I supposed to do green or pink? I don't remember. I always think it's a great system. And then, no. Okay, so he has a interview, or they talk with 808 Nate, who's one of his sound guys, on Infamous. And he says that Melly told him, me and you are twins. But he said that the friendship between the 4 of the YNW was even more intense than him and 808 Nate being twins. He said they all share one brain. They are all twins. Sack is me. I am Sack. Which, at that point in time, then they are dropping the mixtape, which is right before the murders. I am you. So that's super interesting to me because there seems to be that they all have individual functions, that they all have individual lives that they want to lead. Melly has girlfriends and things, and they seem to have individual goals as well, but that they really gravitate towards this idea that they are just one person. So that is just so interesting to me. But another thing that's interesting to me is that I listened to all these interviews before and the podcast, and then I watched the documentary again. It's only like 20 minutes long, guys. So if you want to watch it, it is it's great, and you can, I forgot that I can like do the things, babe, like add there. Yes, rest in peace to Sack. So anywho, what was I saying? From Just Mel? Oh, no, I didn't see that. Yeah, I want to highlight that. This is a great point. This is kind of a thought about dissociative disorders. So dissociative disorders, they're multiple. They're not just, people think of multiple personalities being the only dissociative disorder that there is. But there are actually multiple types of dissociating that can manifest into a disorder. There are people that have a derealization syndrome where they think that the world around them isn't real. But dissociative identity disorder is kind of what Melly is almost diagnosing himself with, where he says, he has these personalities. And it's a misnomer that DID is that you wouldn't be aware of the alters. So a lot of people I see comment that like, oh, well, he can't have DID. Well, first of all, DID is really, really rare. So they say that. And then they say, well, he can't have DID because you don't know that you have other personalities. But that isn't true. That is a misnomer. That's like a Hollywood type adaptation of DID. Awareness can come at any time. It may not happen at the very onset of the disorder, but it can happen at any time afterwards. This is an excellent question. Do you think he made up those personalities because he can't handle his emotions, so he separated them? This is a common way. This wraps up a lot of different defense mechanisms. You know, he's compartmentalizing and putting it into a totally different person. You know, that wasn't him, that was Melvin, or that, you know, but yes, I do think that he had so much trauma in his life that he couldn't become. He describes himself as an alien. He describes himself as misunderstood. He could never really be whole or wholly himself. He didn't really, you know, experience himself in life because of so much trauma, is what I think. I think this is an excellent, excellent point. Yes, thanks for being here, everyone. So I wanted to get back to Jamie a little bit. First of all, I just want a disclaimer because I feel bad even bringing these things up because this person also was a child when she had this baby. And I do feel like a lot of times women are blamed for men's actions. And I don't find that Jamie's to blame, but I did find this interesting that Jamie, I listened to all the interviews in Infamous first. And then I go back and watch the documentary. And the thing that I notice is that there seems to be two different experiences of Jamie. In the interviews, Melly is saying, you know, nobody believed in me. And I think at that point he's talking about the abuse. My mom didn't believe in me. He said, nobody thought I could be a rapper. Nobody, nobody thought that I could do what I'm going to do. And so he's talking about that. And he's talking about living with his grandma starts living with his grandma at age 12 because his mom says she's choosing her husband. But on the documentary, we see that Jamie is completely doting over him. She looks like the most loving mom. She talks about his childhood. There is no gap in there for Jamie where she says, you know, like, hey, some bad stuff happened here. Now, of course, all this can be edited. All these things, you know, can be not shown in a documentary. But it was very interesting that seemed to be very different. She's like, oh my gosh, we knew from the time he was in kindergarten because he sang The Lion King in a 4th grade promotion and he was the best thing we'd ever seen. We knew from the time that he was a baby that he was going to be special, that he was going to make it. Well, Melly doesn't back that up. Melly is like, no one thought this. And when I said I wanted to do it, people were like, you need to get a real job. And they did not believe that. Also, there's just very much hardly any space between their ages. You know, they're 15 years apart. They could be siblings. So from her side of what she's presenting, she was always doting. She always believed in him. She always knew he'd be a star. But from some of the friends that hung around with the YNW crew, they say Jamie wasn't around until they got big. And then she was like suspect of everyone that's in the group because she did not want, you know, her son taken advantage of. And she also wanted to be, you know, let in to the group. So that's kind of what the people that they interview in Infamous say about Jamie. she wasn't really around until the money started coming in. So that's interesting. I also, going back to her big beef with Sack, she says, he's talented, and he's talented because of me. Which I see Melly, he talks about, I want to kiss my mom because I want to be out of jail. I think he loves his mom. He talks about getting his mom a house, moving her out of Gifford, like all these things. But I don't see him saying, I'm only here because my mom believed in me. So I just thought that was interesting. Yes, I agree, Mandy. They're basically siblings. Both of them were basically, being raised by the grandmother. So, what are my thoughts on this? I think I did everything I wanted to say from the other stuff so that you would have all the background I wanted before. Yes. Okay. So here's some things that I thought were so interesting. Now, this is so different now. Like, Melly's mental state now must be just completely different. First of all, he's 24 now. Still not fully grown amygdala, fully grown frontal lobe. Things are still growing in his brain. He is still developing as a human being. And for the last, I think, 2 years, he has been a lot of the time in 23 hours, 1 hour out, which is super, super nuts. Oh, thank you so much, Sarah. Sarah sent a super chat for $4.99. That's so sweet. She says, thank you for doing all this research for us, Shannon. You're welcome. I have really, really enjoyed this. And this case, I mean, we're going to get to my thoughts. So you'll know what I think. But it's just, it has my heart so much. Just knowing that the victims were so young and the persons in jail for this right now are so young, and that this happened. I agree, Charlotte. His treatment in jail is barbaric. We do not, on Infamous, I heard one of the people say, we don't lock up our dogs for, more than a certain amount of hours, or you're abusing them as an animal. And he is being in solitude for 23 hours a day. It's very upsetting. This is great. Megan says, I was 17 when I got pregnant, 18 when I had my son. He's 24 now. He is my life. My number one goal in life was to make sure he was safe and had every opportunity to succeed. We have choices. Absolutely. Absolutely. So his treatment now clearly has had effects on his mental state. He also is not allowed, because he's in that solitary confinement, he's also not allowed visitors. He's not allowed phone calls at many times. He hasn't been allowed. So just awful, because, that isn't good on the human psyche at all. But unfortunately, when Melly very first was arrested for this crime, he had been in jail before. He'd been in and out of jail for things like, most of the time, firing a weapon or having a knife at school or whatever. He'd been in and out of these types of situations where he's maybe there for a year and then he's out and things are great. Things actually get better for him when he's released from jail the first time. Like, his life takes off. Things are great. And so partially, I think that why we see so much positivity from Melly, and especially in those very first hearings, first of all, he's happy because he can see his family in the courtroom. He hasn't been able to see his family. He also is, has been parentified somewhat to Jamie. He feels like he has to protect his mom. So he's going to smile. He's going to put on a brave face to make sure that, Jamie's happy also when she sees him. But he thinks all those things when he's very first locked up again. I think he thinks that it's going to be like, it's going to get worked out or whatever. He might be in for a little while, but it's going to get worked out and it's going to be fine. And that's partially because of his age. That's partially because of, his brain processing. And it's also because that's what, the best predictor of our future is our past. So if we have something happen to us once, we think that's what's going to happen again. So Melly does not behave himself in jail whatsoever. He acts like a child. He acts like a menace. He calls himself a menace at some point in time in interviews. He is not swayed at all by consequence. So you guys, he's doing like dumb stuff. He plugs a toilet with a towel from the shower and he flushes and flushes and flushes and flushes and flushes and flushes until he floods the whole freaking unit. So of course he's going to get solitary for that. He's going to get thrown in the shoe or whatever they call it. He's going to get thrown in there for that. Then he freaking starts a giant fight and says that he's going to kill the CO. So again, he's, being it's not something that he is imagining, I think, is going to have these consequences that he has. I just don't see him seeing those in a real way. The other reason I think this is because people have observed him in the very first hearings, and these are people that go and cover trials and cover court hearings all the time, and they are like, this guy seems too happy. He seems too unfazed. This is not usually what you see from a person who has such serious charges. When they first see their family, typically they break down, they are crying. It's a very solemn moment, and that is just not at all the way Melly has been in the courtroom, especially in the earlier hearings. But we also know from watching the trial, he was, smiley quite a bit of the time while he was on trial. We had many discussions about he seems to be laughing and joking around. He has a big, beautiful smile. He does. He is very thin framed. He's looks like a child. I mean, he is a child. He's 24 years old. He's not fully developed, in my opinion. Of course, he's legally adult, but he looks like a child. On trial for murder and with the possibility of having the death penalty. So it's heavy for us when we're watching it. And he, but something that I keep going back to when I think about Melly and this crime is that I think about this statement that he makes in the documentary. He says, I wrote this down so I could get it right. He says that he didn't want, he says, I always dress like this. And he, at that point in time in the documentary, he's wearing a lot of bright colors. He's wearing Jordans and he has his hair up. And the bright colors, it makes him look joyful. And he says, I always dress like this. Smile on my face. Dress clean cut. Innocent look. These two dogs are so ready to eat, so they're just being a-holes. So he says, smile on my face. Dress clean cut. Innocent look. I kept that because I didn't want Melly the menace to be revealed. But every day, I had a pistol in my lunchbox at school. Some days, 2 pistols. So when I heard that in the documentary, my heart kind of sank because I really thought that some of his childlike antics and behavior was because, he was in some ways innocent. Do I think he did the crime? Yes. Unfortunately, very unfortunately. But I still wanted to believe in his innocence. And And that part of the documentary just guts me because I'm like, oh man, he knew that by this like joyful persona that he puts on, that people view him as, innocent and not a menace. So that really was um, just heartbreaking for me to see that part of the documentary. It just really hit me. I was like, oh, damn it, Melly. The other thing that really strikes me is this whole like enmeshment, which we have talked about. We talked about with the Adelsons, and we talk about with gangs. It's very gang behavior like. I'm not talking about whether or not Melly was involved in a gang or not. That really doesn't matter to me so much in this episode. Does it inform some of his decisions? Sure, probably. Yes, of course. But right now, I just really think that more than the gang telling him to do something, Melly was motivated by this feeling of a betrayal and a schism inside of himself. Because they were so enmeshed. He tattoos, before they're dead, he tattoos Juvie and Sack's name on above his eyebrow. He has his girlfriend on the other side. So he has their names on his face. He calls them my brother. He calls them my twin. I'm Sack. Sack is me. And imagine I'm Sack. Sack is me. And Sack suddenly starts saying he's going to kill your mother. This obviously is going to cause some tension. And also, Melly's dad was interviewed, and Melly's dad said he felt like Sack was making him work so hard all the time. He couldn't just enjoy his life. He couldn't, hang out with his girlfriend as much as he wanted to because Sack was really driven. He was a driven person, and he knew, he was the brains of the operation. He knew you got to strike when the iron is hot as a content creator. If you are hot right then, you do not have time to go hang out with your girlfriend. We've got to get going, on our careers. So I think that also was bothering Melly at that time because he's starting to have this, what he feels is like almost like a schism within himself because he views them as him and they have no boundaries. We heard about, when we had Boom on, Bryson Boom Paul, he talked about it's very common in this culture and way of growing up that you would share a phone. Like Jay and I were like, no, that seriously just doesn't happen. But Bryson was like, no, that does happen. And Sack and Melly were on the same phone plan. There was just not normal boundaries that people experience when they are in a healthy friendship between these four friends. They were very, very enmeshed and codependent. My other big thought about Melly was who he idolized and compared himself to. When he says Melly is, let me read that again, where he quotes about Melly. Melly is loving, genuine, turned up, happy Michael Jackson. I thought that was so interesting because Michael Jackson is another artist who we know has battled with child abuse. We know that he was stunted. I mean, we know this man was so stunted that he created, with his millions and billions of dollars, he created a place to live called Neverland where he didn't have to grow up. So it's so interesting to me that Melly, that personality, the Melly personality, seems to be like, I'm hiding that I'm a menace behind that I am childlike and I don't grow up. I'm not swayed by consequences because they're not real to me. I pull out a gun when I want to, I bring it to school in my lunchbox. I pull it out on these guys at high school because they piss me off. I shoot it outside when I'm 9 years old. All these things seem to add up to that's kind of the go-to for when he has this anger boiling inside of him, which we know as basically what he says is Melvin. He says Melvin is always angry. Melvin comes out at night. I need to stop letting him out. Melvin thinks about murder all the time. So I think that, yeah, you're right. They shared a plan. Now, what I'm saying though is they did use each other's phones more than, I am assuming you're a white woman as your profile picture is a white woman. They shared what Bryson was bringing forward was that it was more of a community thing, because when somebody in your community comes up, you come up with them. And this is something within their culture that they share their money. This is not common in white culture. We do not like just give and give to everybody around us. We're like, that's my iPhone. Do I think that the defense theory of the shared phone is correct? No. But I do think if the phone is laying there and one of them wants a phone, they pick it up and they use it. That doesn't happen in my life, in my culture. And whether that's race, class, whatever it is. But when Bryson explained it, I was like, oh yeah. And I've seen that before. My daughter's biracial. I've seen this behavior before, and I thought, oh, okay, that's very interesting. So your success is the community and your team's success. And he was 4 people. Every success he had was those 4 people's success. Now that caused a problem because when you got to split everything 4 ways, that's really difficult. But the Michael Jackson thing struck me. It like rang like a bell in my head that he described himself as this person that we know psychologically was very stunted by abuse. And we know that Melly blames abuse for his anger. We've seen that, he wrote that on Facebook. And I don't fault him for that. I'd be pretty fucking pissed too. His stepdad's abusing him and his mom's like, sorry, I'm actually going to stay married to him. And you can go live somewhere else. So I think that way of being this stunted, stuck in a place. Viv, this is a great point, and this is what I'm trying to get at. Being abused does make you have an inner rage. And that is what Melly is describing as his life. He is saying, I want everyone to see I'm clean cut. I have a big smile. I am, I want everyone to see that part of me. I don't want to let this out. I got to quit letting Melvin out. He knows that that's not the good part of him. He knows that. But I think he does have that rage inside of him from that. And the other person that he really looks up to, he says he has one CD that he listens to when he's younger. He's like 14, 15. He only has one CD. And it's Chris Brown. And I thought that's very interesting because that's another example for him possibly of, lyrically it makes a lot of sense because Chris Brown is kind of more lyrical than rap. And, that's kind of how Melly wants to develop his style. So that all makes sense. But the thing that sticks out to me is that Chris Brown is an example of someone that definitely has rage problems. We've seen this documented numerous times. And seems to also not be super swayed by consequences and hasn't had many consequences. So that's just super interesting to me that the two musicians that I hear come up in his interviews, his documentary, his thing, out to the public is this. It's Chris Brown and Michael Jackson. I just thought that was super interesting. Yeah, coroner armpits says in neurodivergent world we call that masking. Absolutely. He has an inner rage, but he's trying to mask it and trying to, basically kind of like he has to switch to another person, which he says, like he's switching to another person. He really thinks it's another person, or he claims that it's another person. And so he switches to Melly instead of Melvin. So basically, I want to see if there's questions or comments that I'm missing, because I know I missed like a lot. Oh, Lisa, she is so sweet. Now, Lisa, thank you so much for buying coffee. And thank you for signing up for the challenge, the TDM challenge. Your mandala was amazeballs. I loved it. All right. I'm just seeing if I missed anybody. Yep, this is true too. Very true. Growing up, I grew up just a skosh above the poverty line. When money is tight and they had to share, it became a way of life, even when they made money. Even sometimes, I still like can't wrap my mind around, all my clothing is secondhand. All of everything. And I like being frugal and those things, but it's also because I cannot wrap my brain around another way of life besides the way I lived for so long. And now I just tell myself, well, I'm just being smart and it's sustainable and all these things, but it's honestly, it's become a way of life for me. Every time I hear, no, I never had a car until I married Jay. I never had a car that worked all the time. Like it's such a blessing that I walk out and my car starts. This was never a thing for me. So now when I drive it just happened today. I'm driving my daughter to her theater rehearsal, and there is a jackhammer to the right of us. They are jackhammering an entire sidewalk. And immediately in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, the car's breaking down. Every time I hear a noise outside of anything, I'm like, okay, well, the car's breaking down. And now we're going to have to, figure something out. And Sloan always talks about, oh, was that this car that did this? Or was that car that broke down in the middle of the road in Kansas City and we had to get an Uber and it was 100 degrees. And so it just, it does become a way of life, and it's hard to break. And also a big point that Ace Hood, who is the rapper, who is a narrator for the infamous podcast he talks about, is another thing is when you are that poor growing up, you don't have any financial literacy. And so when you do start to make money, you have no idea what to do with it. You don't know who to trust. You don't know that you should, buy stocks. You should have a 401k. You don't know any of those things because that's not your experience at all in life. Your experience has been stuck on survival for so long. You don't even know those things exist. And if you do know they exist, it's like, that doesn't apply to me. I'm young and I can just keep making money right now. I'm never going to be, out of the game. I'm never going to need a 401k because I'm not going to retire until I'm old. So, making sure I did not miss any other things. Oh, man. Leonard Amber, I thank you so much. She goes into our videos and timestamps them, you all, and it is so amazing. I love it. I love her for doing that. I love a little bit of organization. Thank you all so much for being here today and listening to me. I want to apologize because I don't have any visuals for this. I may go back in and make this a video. I'm trying to learn to make real YouTube videos, not just lives. So this may be another test project for me, and maybe I'll put in some other things. But I will get better on my lives as far as like showing different things. But I did not do that today. I was literally researching until the last minute. I listened to all the Melly songs on the way to the theater and back from Sloan's thing today. So now hopefully I can maybe put Melly to bed for a while. But I think one of the things that really gets me about this case is that it's so sad. And I mean, every murder case is sad, but it's so sad that these four very young lives and four people that when you watch the documentary, they have these big dreams and they, um, they really want to rise above where they came from and they want to change their lives. And so I think we can all just really relate to that. We can all relate to being that young idealist and thinking, I'm going to be the one. I'm going to be the one. I'm going to get out of this situation. It's not good. And so that just really strikes me when I watch the documentary is just they are babies and two of them are dead and two of them are on trial for their lives. And they are young. If Melly goes to jail for the rest of his life, he's 24 years old. Like Bob Motta says, that's a long time to never touch the sand or the grass with your feet again, to never, be able to go outside when you want to never go on a date with somebody you love. That's a long time. And even crazier if, they decide to give him the death penalty, because then the death penalty ends up being somewhat similar to what he's going through right now, which is that he's going to be in solitary confinement so much. So it just strikes me. And of course, I want to think I do, have sympathy for Bortland and Melly because of where they came from and the things that they had to overcome. But of course, my heart is more so with Sack Chaser and Juvie. They did not deserve that to happen to them. And it's rough for them because they get caught in this, like, you don't want to punish Melly when you see him, when you watch him for a while. It is hard to imagine, like, putting this guy in jail for 80 years, 70 years, whatever. It's hard to imagine. But then you also, you think, well, if I think that, what did I think? How do I think about justice for Juvie and Sack Chaser? How is that justice if I don't want to punish Melly? And so that just really has got me like in a chokehold since I started researching. Megan, you are a sweetheart. Fuzzy. Okay. Oh, and I missed one from Fuzzy Puff, so I'm going to go back up there. But Megan, I just want to tell you thanks and thank you for being here and opening up about your own story today. That was really awesome, and you didn't have to do that. And thanks for letting us in. And I am so glad that your son had a mom like you. Where is the Fuzzy Puff? Donnie, yes, I gotta put this up. Shan, Fluffy Stuffs gave $10. I see it now. Here it is. She says, appreciate you for sharing your insights in a thoughtful manner. Your vulnerability when sharing parts of your own story in connection with your research is inspiring. Thank you so much. So thank you, you guys. But I don't know. Okay, so let me give you an update though. Well, I would give you an update if I remember where I wrote down. Oh, 2/5 now is the new date. 2/5/24 is the openings for, that's what it's set for, the openings in the new trial. So we shall see. We shall see if they can make it. Yes, Dada Lisa, I agree. He is like my personal god there in the background. So now you all know. I know how it feels now because I do this to him all the time. I'm sitting in the living room or I'm folding laundry in the living room and I'm correcting something he says or telling him about a super chat that he missed or something. So now I really know how it feels. Um, Thank you so much for being here. If you do want to join our project for the Mandala project, it's still open. You can join at any time. Just have to be a patron so that you can get on our Discord because that's where our private chat is, where we get to post our mandalas every day. If you want more details on that, you can find it at Shannon Shaming on Twitter or X, as some people are calling it. And besides that, let's see. What do we have coming up? Do we have anything coming up, babes? Monday is going to be so freaking fun. It's going to be a fun Monday, which is like uncommon. But we have Todd McComas and Jessica Knoll, the investigators, on with us. You may remember them from, they came on for Courtroom Crawl with us one day, and they're absolutely hilarious. Todd McComas is a prior uh, agent, not from the FBI, prior detective, right, babe? Yes, prior detective. And then he became a stand-up comic. So it's like he's like Jay's dream guy. And then there's Jessica Knoll, and she's been an investigative journalist for many, many years. And they do a podcast together, and it's absolutely wonderful. It's called The Investigators. I'm going to link it down below. And please follow that. Give it 5 stars if you will, and come back and watch them on Monday night with us because it's going to be great. We're going to interview them for creators who crush. But if you've watched Todd and Jessica at all, you know that you're going to laugh and you're going to have a good time. And then Jay will be on during the day on Monday. We're going to get back to Young Thug, the RICO trial. So that is back on Monday. So we will see you soon. Show the knife, Donnie. I don't see the knife isn't in here. I'm sorry, but I can't get demonetized by showing the knife, Donnie, but I will show the blue wrench. It sits right here next to us. This is Donnie's blue mod wrench. Jay says now my hands will be blue. But that's just a little bit of special Donnie just rubbing off on you when you touch it. All right. Thank you all so much for being here. Have a lovely day. I'm sure you'll probably show up for Murder Church in the morning. Steve is doing Dr. Jack Kevorkian. Don't miss it. Thanks, everybody.